You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP. Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. MotoGP tried something new with its very own version of Monaco as the tight and twisty Balaton Park made its debut on the calendar. Something that wasn't so new was the total domination of Marc Marquez in red as the other side of the garage saw red in a disaster weekend for his teammate. KTM and Aprilia continued their resurgence whilst Honda decided to get in on the action too. I am your host Kyle Power, and today I am joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. Returning from the doldrums of tech issues, it's co-host Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
Thanks, Kyle. Doing well again here with the tech issues solved and raring to go for the Balaton Park review. I think it threw up a lot of talking points, and they didn't even necessarily include Marquez being brilliant because a lot of stuff happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else who is also brilliant is the tyre-obsessed trumpeter, Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
I am completely ready to be confidently wrong about everything so you have someone to yell at. But are we thinking that Jules might be the Bagnaia of this podcast?
Oh, shots fired, Jules, shots fired.
I'll take it.
Awesome. So we'll swiftly go on to the weekend overview before it gets too spicy between my two panelists. So coming into the weekend, Pol Espargaro is in for Maverick Vinales, whose shoulder is still a bit too knackered to ride. Someone else who has been riding a bit too much and then knackered themselves was Aleix Espargaro, who was supposed to be filling in for the two injured LCR Honda riders, but he binned his push bike and he cannot ride either. So everyone's injured and there was only one LCR on the grid. Pecco Bagnaia backtracks on his comments about running out of patience with Ducati. Is their split starting to show in the relationship? We might talk about that a bit later. Talking about talk, there is a lot of talk of Marc being able to win the championship by Misano, which is insanity, but it might become a bit more of a possibility. Miller is looking like there's a good possibility he will also keep his ride, and we heard whispers that the Yamaha V4 may be making its debut at Misano. So the championship standings, obviously it's Mr. Marc variety of 142 point lead over his brother, and with a Bagnaia 197 points back, and then a really cool battle between Marco Bezzecchi, Franco Morbidelli and Fabio Di Gianantonio, with Acosta lurking in the realms as well. They're all battling over fourth place in the championship at the moment. So then, practice and quali. And so Jules, we saw a couple of Aprilias going bang in practice.
Yeah, it was pretty peculiar because a Trackhouse and a Aprilia factory bike went up in smoke pretty soon, one after the other in FP1, and made you think like, okay, what's going on here? Did they arrive at this track with a mistaken setting, or one theory was that Jorge Martin, who was one of the Aprilias blowing up, was on the bike that he crashed on the previous race, and maybe it was broken all along. But apart from that, the Aprilias turned out to have a great weekend, and we didn't see any of that either. But it did not surprise me, but it did make me think of Digia's bike. Which of course is not an Aprilia but a Ducati, but it went up in smoke in Austria the round before this.
Yeah, good point. We've started to see a few tech issues, haven't we? Now?
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, and maybe it has more to do with, we're nearing the end of this regulation cycle, and I imagine teams are running dry on things they can still improve or develop or tweak and stuff. So they maybe start turning bits up and down within the mechanical parts. which are frozen. The engines are frozen, but maybe they start to look for, tiny bits that might still be in there to improve with other areas running out. So I'm keeping an eye out for similar incidents.
Well, one thing I do know is that I read that Fernandez engine, at least, was end of life, basically. They're running it in Friday practice, probably to save mileage. Now, the thing I don't know, and maybe one of you could be enlightening about, although if you can't, we'll just cut this bit out so nobody knows any better, is there a limit on engines
Yes.
for the season? And if so, then this is making a lot of sense, because what you want to do, and this is just a classic thing with engines, every time you run it, and especially when you run it in a qualifying session, you're losing horsepower. You're losing horsepower. You're losing material. You lose a little bit of this every time you run it. And the more kilometers, the less power you have. So a track like Balaton, where you don't have an incredibly high top speed, is a really good target for an engine that might not be at its peak condition.
That is a very good point. And yes, indeed, there is a limit on the engines. I believe they're only allowed 3 or 4 engines per year. There aren't that many they are allowed. I can't remember the exact number, but that is a very good reason why we don't see the burnout anymore. Unfortunately, we used to see epic burnouts, the celebrations at the end, and that's why we don't see them. Obviously, them revving the nuts off the engine stationary without much airflow going through it is very bad for engines, and we don't see them anymore, which I think is a shame. Bring back the burnout, I say. So somebody who has doing quite a lot of burnouts in metaphorically speaking, during practice was Morbidelli, who binned it twice in FP1 but was looking pretty quick. Others who were looking really quick was Acosta, and Pol Espargaro as well was right up in there. Binder again struggling on the KTM, but the KTM looking very, very quick. Nasty high side for Acosta in there. But what was really intriguing in practice then, guys, was the traffic issues. Very tight track, and Jules, we saw some issues for Alex Marquez and Jack Miller.
Yeah, you saw quite a bit of riders losing the front, and the Balaton track is the track with the lowest average speed of the whole calendar, and it was almost like they were struggling to get enough heat into the tires to make it stick to the surface, and it looked a bit how do you say this, clumsy or a bit dorky to go down with such low speeds. But you could see these guys were clearly just trying to find the limits and how to ride this twisty track.
Yeah, and whilst doing that, obviously they started to trip over each other quite a lot, and we got traffic issues. So we had Alex Marquez getting blocked originally by Jack Miller, and then they both decided to have a mothers' meeting and handbags at dawn on the racing line as poor Pecco Bagnaia come flying through, trying to push to get himself into Q2, which he failed. Bagnaia, shocking weekend, struggling, not looking quick at all, and the big story of all practice was Bagnaia missing Q2 and only 13th, really, really struggling, while his teammate was looking pretty much dominant across the board. Really bad for Bagnaia. So Bagnaia ends up in Q1 and doesn't get through. He stays at only 5th, Matt. This is like just disaster for Pecco.
Yeah, but as you rightly point out, it's a new track, and even though they got to ride the track on the super bikes, it's not the same as the MotoGP bikes. And in Bagnaia's defense, which I have a feeling since I'm going to be confidently wrong about a lot of things, I have a feeling this is the role that's been assigned to me in today's recording. In his defense, I believe that the only other 25 in the field, which is Digi's, P13 on Friday. So you're going to say it's Bagnaia, but I'm going to say, well, I think that the pair of them didn't do particularly great on the Friday, and Marquez remains the outlier here by doing so very, very well. Although, yeah, gotta love Acosta. You will not outdo my crash.
That is a very good point, because Digi did actually have to come through Q1 as well, and did really, really well, and just scraped through Q1 with Binder actually being unlucky with an identical lap time. So Bezzecchi also had to come through Q1 and ended up putting it an amazing second on the grid again. Absolutely amazing. Digi then puts it on the front row. So there we're seeing quite a common theme of people getting through the front row. And Acosta, you mentioned it, huge, scary, fast crash and gave a cameraman an awful fright there. So the front row was brilliant. Ended up as Marc Marquez on pole, like no surprise there. But Bezzecchi and Digi joined on the front row with Bastianini. We should mention Bastianini here, fourth. Really, really, really quick. Morbidelli in fifth, looking great for the VR46. And then Fabio Quartararo, we might be talking about him a little bit more during the sprint review in a really strong sixth. But Matt, Acosta, only seventh.
One little thing I picked up was the bike that he sent up to visit the cameraman and invite him back to his box had a new pair of forks on it, and I believe the bike that he got on was not similarly equipped. So he was also, in addition to being at the disadvantage of, I've had to run all the way back and hop on the bike, and the bike isn't set up. The bike didn't even have the same equipment, which is a shame when you look at his race pace. As much as we're going to talk about how well everybody did, like you just imagine if Acosta had been up there as well in the first two rows. I do want to ask a question though of you. It's a bit of a high stakes gamble, but it's seeming to me almost to be an advantage at this point to come through Q1 if you can be sure you're getting to Q2, because hasn't Bezzecchi done that a couple of times in a row now?
Well, yeah, he has. He put it on pole last time, and you're kind of right. The one limitation is your tyres. You only get one new set of rear tyres, I think, essentially one run, whereas the other people directly into Q2 can have two new rear tyres, but you get this feel and a sighting lap. But I think you may be right. It's just a massive gamble of how competitive it is. I mean, Bagnaia, what was he, almost less than a tenth off of getting through to Q2, and if you don't, that's it. It's your weekend is ruined, particularly at a track like this, as we saw. So you've got a good point there. I don't think anyone would ever intentionally want to go through Q1 if they can, but those who do go through Q1, you're right. There is a trend. They seem to do really, really well. So we mentioned the blocking earlier of Alex Marquez and Miller, and that was quite poignant because they both received a 3-place grid penalty. So with Bagnaia only 5th in Q1, he was actually looking to line up 15th or 16th on the grid, but he got promoted 2 positions up for the main race because of the grid penalties for Miller and Alex Marquez. But of course, that doesn't apply to the sprint, which we'll talk about now. So on to the sprint review, and who wants to take this one? Jules, what was Fabio up to into turn one?
Yeah, there was on beforehand there were a lot of concerns about turn one because the runoff, the gravel trap wasn't that wide, and still the crash that did happen, Fabio, he tried to lunge it on the inside, and you just saw he was no way he was going to make that turn, and I thought it was a bit of a miracle that eventually only he went down. He made Bastianini go really wide, also into the gravel trap, but he was able to at least recover himself onto the track again. But it could have been so much worse. I mean, we saw. I think it was 2 seasons ago at Barcelona. I think it was Nakagami who took out in turn one in Barcelona, who took out a couple of guys in such high speed. Could have been a lot worse. But yeah, it makes you think, guy like Quartararo, I mean, he should have been pretty positive, qualifying 6th on that Yamaha. But somehow he just really miscalculated that. And he looked pretty bad.
I mean, first of all, Quartararo, perhaps is his new name. Second of all, we were so close to seeing the entirety of the first 2 rows just utterly taken out. And, you don't want to see people get hurt. But if that had happened and no one got hurt, I would have thoroughly enjoyed it, just as a thing to talk about. But it was, I think Jules has the right of it. It's kind of amazing that he really only wound up ruining about 2 people's races, Bastianini and Acosta, who wound up getting shoved wide. and therefore losing a lot of places.
Yeah, he also ruined Bez's races as well, Bezecchi, because he also had to lift the bike
Oh,
up.
right.
And
Yes. Sorry.
yeah, so he was going to do well. And so we kind of like the one person who looked like maybe could challenge Mark really well, apart from Digi, who was looking really good, was Bez. And yeah, he get pushed down to ninth. The one person who was the main victim of this was Bastianini, as we said, who was up to second. An amazing start. He's making a huge resurgence. We forgot who he was at the start of the season. And with the KTM resurgence, we'll talk about it a bit later, but he ends up getting taken out. And then subsequently then ends up wiping Zarco out later on in the lap. And that's Bastianini's weekend over. He gets a penalty. We will discuss that later. I want to ask my panel about that a little bit later. So with all of this carnage, you would have thought it would really benefit Bagnaia. You would have thought it'd be right up in the top 10, but he wasn't. He was only 14th, despite all of this drama. It wasn't going well at all. And, you know, Acosta sort of gets out of his way by binning it, battling Jorge Martin for 10th. Jorge Martin's starting 16th, by the way, so he's been doing really well with coming through the field. But at the front, Mark just has a crazy pace advantage. And just to sum this up, he's lapping a second faster than his teammate Bagnaia, Matt, pretty much throughout the entirety of the race.
Yeah, until you remember that he's been garbage at sprints the last 2 years. And it's only this year the bike also has put him in a much worse way. And I think we'll probably talk about it when we talk about the Grand Prix. But he was also how shall we say, experimenting a bit. So he's experimenting on a bike in a formulation that he knows he's terrible at. And on a track where, I don't want to say passing was impossible, because I think we have plenty of examples of the contrary, but passing wasn't easy either. And so, and that's been his thing all season anyway. Once he falls back, he's not able to overtake for whatever reason. So you add those things up, and I think disappointed but not surprised is the correct way to put it.
Yeah, that's true. And Jules, it's kind of sad to see, because I think Bagnaia was one of the actual slowest people on the track in the sprint. It looked like he was holding up a Gura and Oliveira at the end.
I think the two latter riders you name, they were suffering from the track. Overtaking was possible if you had real overspeed and you had the bike and the confidence to throw it on the inside of one of the chicanes, for example. And the guys behind Bagnaia, I mean, I think he was lucky that was Oliveira and Ogura, who Ogura clearly still not fit and in the shape that he was in the first phase of the season, and Oliveira, well, never really been there this season. Last season, obviously, also been injured, but so I think that said a lot. And like Carl just said, a lot of guys took advantage of 4 or 5 riders going off in the first lap, apart from Bagnaia. And indeed, later on, we discovered that he was riding for the first time with a drastically changed setup. More on that later on. But it's also a matter of confidence and believing in yourself. But if you arrive at the track and you say, yeah, well, this track has all of the bits that I don't feel confident with and comfortable with on this bike, I mean, yeah, what kind of mindset do you start off with then?
Yeah, exactly that. And yeah, you're right. He did say that. He said, I knew I was going to struggle on this track as soon as he saw the layout. So yeah, bad times for Bagnaia, unfortunately, but it was good times for his teammates. So Marc Marquez comes in with a dominant victory, brilliant times and very welcome to see the VR46 team. So Digi Antonio, fantastic. So the 2 GP25s coming home, one first and second, and this just rubs salt into Bagnaia's wounds, because the 2 bikes, the 2 other bikes that he's on were first and second. Morbidelli, a really strong third, and he could have maybe been second. It was Digi put quite a hard move on him at the end of the first lap to actually get that. And I think the warm, fuzzy feeling story of the whole sprint was Luca Marini in 4th, coming back from his Azuka injuries. Amazing. Aldeguer 5th with crazy late race pace again. Johan Mir stayed on the bike and 6th. incredible. He stayed on the bike. I think there's 2 races on the bounce. He stayed on the bike, which is incredible, and not been wiped out. So in 6th, Bezzecchi recovered to 7th. Alex Marquez only 8th, and he hasn't taken his free place grid penalty. That happens, and with Bagnaia struggles, he keeps leaving the door open, and no one wants to go through it. And Jorge Martin snatching a point in 9th, so really, really strong. So as we move on to the Grand Prix review after this sprint, we want to. We will discuss it a little bit later, but there were some penalties issued. So Quartararo gets a single long lap penalty and Bastianini gets a double long lap penalty, but a bit more on that later because we have some views. So on to the Grand Prix review. And the first topic I want to talk about, we didn't give him a specific topic last week, but it was one of his actions on the final lap, which I want to give this a special topic, and it's Marc Marquez was pretty much on another level this weekend. I think it's probably one of the most dominants we've seen him in a Grand Prix situation all year, and just the contrasting fortunes to the other side of the garage, and it was just completely vivid. So Marc was uncontested completely in the sprint, but in the main race, Jules, he didn't just walk away from it. He was down to 4th in like turn 3.
I think he was a bit more down than he would have expected. He was the only rider up front who opted for the medium rear tire for the Sunday race, while Bezzecchi and Acosta had the soft rear. So I think he must have calculated they might get a better start than me, and I'll probably trail one of those guys. But being back and forth is a bit tricky also for him, I still feel, because the few times that we saw him getting trouble or going down were always the instances first phase of the race being in traffic. So, but he stayed calm and like we've pretty much seen since I think 5, 6, 7 races now. You're just sitting there and you see just a confident guy knowing this race is going to come to him in the second phase of the Grand Prix, and almost like a cat toying with a plastic mouse. I'll just pick my moment whenever I feel is ready, or whenever you make a mistake, and I'll be there.
Okay. Yeah, Marc is good. Yeah, the sprint offered up zero challenge to him because he wound up in front from the start and just tootled on off. It was a masterpiece in being 2 or 3 tenths faster than the guy behind you. And I think we're beginning to see this pattern. If he gets the free air at the start, he establishes a reasonable gap. He manages, and then if anybody gets some pace, he's got a reserve and he can easily match or exceed what comes at him. This isn't a challenge for him. This is like, he can do this, and you wake him up at 3 a.m., he can do it in his sleep. I'm going to argue, I think this race in particular challenged him in ways that aren't obvious. And there's 2 things I'm going to point out here. Bastianini and Digi. As is, Bez got the jump. Digi wasn't on the grid. Marc hits Bez into the first corner and drops back behind Morbidelli. And was he behind somebody else? I can't recall.
He has Marini briefly into like turn 3. He actually dropped down to 4th, but he smashed him and nailed him immediately back.
And then he's stuck behind Morbidelli, so he has to work, but he's patient. He's very smart, and he knows he's got the medium tire on. So for Morbidelli, it's like on like. But for Bez has a soft tire on, and he's like, I'm going to make hay while the sun shines out here. And this is where it gets interesting, because we saw him, once he caught up to Bez, put a move on him. And immediately, Bez puts the move right back on him, and they went at it again, and then he had to back off. He said to himself, I believe in his head, he said, you know what? I've got a medium rear tire on. That soft is not going to last. I already know I'm sure he knows what Bezzecchi and Aprilia have been saying. Like Bez said, I put this on for stability under braking. which means that he's using the tire as a crutch. It's going to eventually lose lap time. He just has to be patient. But if that bike had been slightly better set up, or maybe on the medium tire, I don't know. Suddenly, maybe we've got a real race on our hands. The problem with winning as slowly as possible is you do leave yourself vulnerable to somebody having a flash of inspiration. And I think we're getting closer and closer every race.
We are. It's true. And you mentioned Bastianini there because we were essentially robbed of Bastianini attacking him. And if Bastianini would have been there and started there, and also Digi, that we'll talk about a bit later as well, Digi should have been there, and he had a problem on the warm-up lap, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, and you're making the point that I absolutely failed to make, so thank you for paying attention there. Which is namely, to it, if you look at how much distance he lost when he hit Bezzecchi, he would have been behind Bastianini. He would have been behind Digi, and he would have also, Acosta again. He wouldn't have been that. He might have been backed up into Acosta once Acosta's tires came on. That's kind of where I'm going with that. So
he would have been much more sort of inconvenient. He would have been down to probably sixth. But like Jules, I'd still argue that even if you did get pushed back down to sixth, the pace advantage he seemed to have on everyone, and they said it was really hard to pass here, and you can see he was having to take risks on the brakes with Bezzecchi. I'll make the point that even if he does get pushed down to sixth, I think he will still end up winning fairly easily.
Right now, but the point Matt makes, I think is interesting because we all kind of hear and we must agree that it seems that Mark has something left, that he's not pushing the bike to its limits and that he's cruising, etc. At this point, with the competition he has, he can afford to, and he can afford to, what you see him do all the time, whenever he gets in P1, he immediately pulls a gap and then he manages that or slowly builds it. But I would have liked to see if Digi was there in the form he had from Saturday on, or Bastianini, or Acosta on his 100% bike. I'm curious to see with. I think it's hard to deny all the factories are getting closer together. I would like to see what Mark has left and how much it would cost him to maybe fight more in the earlier stages of the races, to not be upfront that soon or on his terms. It will cost him tire wear. It will cost him not being able to ride the lines he wants. We all see what's happening once you get into traffic. Look at his brother in the last couple of races. It's a different ball game, and I would like to see that. I think his advantage seems so big now, but I think we don't need as much as his gap is right now to close that even more. Does that sound logical?
Yeah, no, it does, and I think you're almost making a pseudo case for Matt's fantastic idea that he come up with during the race I was absent for, which is the Saxon Ring, where he made the point of if Marquez gets pole, you should give him a long lap penalty. Make him take a long lap penalty, which I think is genius. The way the sport is at the moment, let's go all NASCAR on it. Let's all go boogity, boogity, boogity and cheeseburger on it. Let's cheeseburger it up a bit and give some
pole penalty.
And yeah, it's exactly a pole penalty. Let's give him some success penalty. And because it makes the races interesting, and we didn't think we were going to get an interesting race here, and the fact that Mark would ended up fourth in turn 3 made it an interesting race. But I see what you're saying, Jules. Like he definitely does seem to be managing, and the thing, which is why I wanted to give him the first topic here, because we talk about Mark a lot. Which the thing which made me almost laugh at the end was I don't think another rider did a 37 throughout the whole race, and Mark on the final lap. Matt, on the final lap with knackered tyres, just casually dunks a 37 on the field just to remind everyone, yeah, you're not getting near me today.
I think someone asked him about that, and his basic reply was, well, you just want to know where the limit is.
on the last lap.
On the last lap.
When you've got like a 4-second gap, whatever it
Yeah,
was.
I know. It's just
dear.
not built like us, are they?
No, indeed. I think that was just an insulting thing of just absolute crushing. He just did it because he could. So unbelievable. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, he can maybe be able to win the title in Misano. I think he needs 222 points, I think it is, over Alex or whoever's in second place. But when they leave Misano, Matt, at the moment he's got 175 over Alex and 227 over Bagnaia.
Yeah, this is actually interesting because obviously, even MotoGP journalists can add 2 and 2 and get 4, and they figured out like, oh, there's a theoretical possibility here of this. But he said that he doesn't want to win at Misano because in order for that to happen, his brother has to have an utter collapse, and he doesn't wish that, frankly, on anyone. Which, again,
how conflicted.
yeah. I do love this in the sense that it seems like the narrative of his championship is going to be who wants second least, Alex, Bagnaia, or maybe is somebody else. Bezzecchi is close enough now between now and the end of the season. I forget the championship order.
That's a great point. Let's talk about Bagnaia a bit then, because nobody. It's like nobody seems to want this second, and Bagnaia, this is the worst weekend I think I've ever seen from him in like this modern era, apart from when he's actually crashed. He's stayed on the bike, but apparently he's saying he's found that apparently the P9, so he ended up finishing P9 after a long lap penalty for not dropping enough time, cutting the chicane, making a mistake battling Pol Espargaro, who ended up finishing ahead of him, the stand-in. I mean, on paper, this is cataclysmic disaster, but he seemed fairly chipper after the race. Matt, what is this silver bullet? And we've heard this before. Surely this isn't real this time.
Well, yeah, this is the Bagnaia who cried wolf maybe one too many times, but he would point at that missed chicane as evidence of his turnaround. And this is so the story, to go back to the beginning. We hear he's running crazy setups in practice, shows up with a brand new setup on Saturday, more on Sunday, goes into the race, comes out of it with his worst finish, just everything about this weekend's bad. He's got a smile on his face. And his literal point would be those mistakes, the chicane, the turn 5. He says, for the first time, the bike tempted me into trying to do things I was afraid to before. I was not a passenger. Finally, I felt like I was riding the bike and the bike wasn't carrying me. So he's going to point to those mistakes and say, here is evidence that it's coming together.
I heard a couple of journalists being skeptical about this. And I can totally see why. I mean, we've heard fragments during the season of Bagnaia seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, or chipping away on improvements. The only time I thought that he was really outspoken about this was after Aragon, when he was able to ride that giant front brake disc. And maybe almost everybody really wanted it to be real, but also, but also we knew but you're not going to be able to run that disc for like 9 out of 10 races. But still, I'm willing to give this the benefit of the doubt, and maybe again because I really wanted to, just to. For the sake of not the championship, because that's over, but to have the best riders, the world champions, not fumbling away like Fabio is also for years now. I mean, it's such a shame. But the reason why I would actually also believe in this is that they have been specific, but not really about, okay, what were the changes? And he said, our adjustments were in the size, the measures of inches or centimeters, depending on what part in the world you live in. And in MotoGP terms, that is huge. I mean,
Massive.
Everybody who's been on a motorcycle or even a bike, if you put your saddle up or down 2 millimeters, you can already feel it and your knees start to hurt or whatever, you know. So they haven't been specific in what parts, and we were discussing this in our WhatsApp group, and it could be anything from indeed ride height to front forks or other bits. We don't know, but it sounded like various parts moved in a big way, and to have like maybe the worst of all the worst weekends you already had, and then to come out with such a smile, I don't think you fake that. What do you think, Carl?
Yeah. So Matt, we're guys, we know an inch is absolutely massive. What do you reckon they changed on the bike?
I love that I read his response, and they specifically said, well, what did you change? And he managed to say absolutely nothing. Except for the changes were big and they were measured in centimeters.
So that's huge. So, that's like 10 millimeters, which is that's huge. You usually talk millimeters, as Jules rightly said. Wheelbase, sure.
The wheelbase, again, could be travel, could be handlebars, could be whatever they've changed. Now, my personal thing is what in the bicycle world we call fork rig, which is essentially the equivalent of caster if you're on a car. And it has to do with how hard it is to turn versus how responsive it is to the inputs. And always that and seat post angle. A relaxed seat post angle and a little more relaxed rake is a bike that's going to be stable at high speed, but not very responsive. And he complains about feel. So you begin to think that, again, like the antis when you're dealing with cars, with wishbones, like you're dealing with the antis, something just went a bit too far and took that feeling away from him. And backing him up on this, and this is a little bit of information I did find out that was really fun, was they also talked to Digi about the 25 bike. And his literal quote is, "The feeling is strange on that bike." But here's the kicker. They also asked him after qualifying, and he goes, "Yes, we changed quite a lot the bike for today, and that's for this Saturday." So again, you have 2 of the 325 bikes making massive changes, and you just begin to think that perhaps between Digi and Bagnaia, they have worked something out, unlike the brake disc, which I think is sort of broken clock, correlation, not causation.
Bit of a false storm. That's an interesting point, because this kind of goes back to what we said before. There were rumours last year that Bagnaia, on quite a few occasions, copied Jorge Martin's setup, and it seems to work quite well for him. And of course, he cannot do that with Marquez, because Marquez has got such a unique way of riding that nobody can copy the setup of his bike, because he rides it very differently to anyone else. So maybe Bagnaia's been a little bit lost. He's lost a crucial setup resource, essentially, to try and help him through that. But that's fascinating that because the VR46 team, they've not, they have been quite inconsistent previously. They've had good bikes and blown a bit hot and cold, and we've heard more than one time this season Digi has turned the bike upside down on setup, been nowhere, and then been really fast on the Sunday, throwing all sorts of setups at it. So it's really, really interesting to hear that, Matt.
And the other thing I'm just going to throw in here, and this wasn't my original comparison, but I did see it, is that Marquez went from riding the 23 bike, which is apparently a bit of a dog relatively in Ducati land, to the 25 bike, which was a significant improvement over the 23 bike. But that the riders who were on the 24 bike and went to the 25 bike had issues with it, because in some ways it wasn't as balanced or as good, and they struggled to be able to put their finger on that issue, and it gave them more problems because they had been used to something that gave them something better where they are now missing it. And so I think that's also, from a psychological point of view, kind of interesting, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, Yeah, and well, but Digi did come out and say the 25 is the best bike that he has ridden, and of course he did the same. He did the same transition from the 23 to the 25. Now, while the 23 was so tricky, was Michelin brought that new rear tyre in, which the bike wasn't designed for, and it made the bike very, very difficult. Uccio made I think the VR46, Rossi's right-hand man, the team manager, the VR46 team made some really interesting comments about that, saying that the 23 bike was really a difficult bike and they're very used to it. But the 25 is great, it's just very hard to get set up. But there's a comment he made about Bagnaia specifically saying that he's lost so much confidence. It's almost like his lost motivation, is not trying in the braking zone so much. And it's not like he's throwing it down the road. And this is my main criticism. I don't want to see riders crashing, but if that was sort of Mark and someone else, like, Quattarara's crashed loads this time. He's over pushing the bike. He's pushing it really hard. And this is what made me think Uccio's comments are. They're like, Bagnaia got to a point where he was so sort of lost that he was to the point where he wasn't prepared to push and put it on the line because it was feeling a bit weird. So maybe it backs up what he was saying, Jules. Maybe this is why he's making mistakes. This is the first time he's actually had the confidence to try to risk it.
Yeah, those comments really fit what we saw unfold on the Sunday. And I think Bagnaia has never been a rider that is looking for the limits and at the risk of going down. I think we, especially last season, I don't remember how many times we said like, oh, he's so methodological, he's like metronomic in the lap times. And this is a guy who, and I know we refer to it also this season, who needs to understand what's happening. And by just throwing it in and, I'll see if I go down or I'll stay up by the exit of the corner and then we'll go to the next one. It's just not how he works. But I on the other hand, can understand how you lose motivation and the hunger to hurt yourself or push yourself really if you don't even feel your bike is doing what you want it to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right there. We lauded him loads about his methodological. I can never say that word. But yeah, he's a professor-like attempt at it. I'm glad I'm not the only one. So yeah, he's a very sort of clinical and analytical sort of take on things. And I've slammed him a few times in this episode, but I really hope this is the silver bullet, and we all really hope, because I love Bagnaia's temperament. I like him. I want to see him up battling Mark. He's an amazing rider, and I think for the good of the sport, we all want to see him in there and back fighting full fit, because we want to see someone taking that challenge to Mark. So someone who's fallen off a little bit, we'll just talk about him a little bit here, is Mark's brother, Alex, a little bit. The 3-place grid penalty was a bit annoying, P8 in the sprint, and a crash again in P14. He's discovered, Jules, I think he's remembered that is Alex Marquez. Like, I've never been that much of a huge fan of his. He seems to crash quite a lot, but a really scruffy few rounds for him.
Yeah, I think a lot of the MotoGP followers were, sitting there looking at their watches like, okay, when is the real Alex gonna return to the sport? I think Alex is a bit of a victim of two things. One, in the first phase of the season, his bike was clearly the best bike after how Mark was riding his 25. Aprilia were still very much looking for how to set up their new bike, to develop it, and that's something that they have done in the second third of this season very well. Jorge Martin returned. KTM have rediscovered themselves. Honda, new chassis, new aero. They all have become quicker. And at the same time, Alex started to fumble a bit, starting in Assen, when he was so impatient to re-overtake Acosta, injured himself, and it seems that since then, every weekend is either crashing, getting a penalty, and those types of things, and ending up in the bunch. And as said before, you're not going to be able to race as clean and as to how you like it as he was used to in the first couple of races.
Yeah, he has. In his defence, he's still 52 points clear of Bagnaia in the championship, which is quite amazing, Matt. But yeah, he needs to rediscover his form quickly. And well, Barcelona next. I think we should be expecting to see a good performance from him there.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this is like any racer, you know, there are tracks or circuits where you're like, I'm just going to try and finish in the bunch, rubber side down. And then there's some where you're like, yeah, no, this really suits me. I'm really going to put it all out there. But what's funny about this is what we're essentially complaining about as the competition has gotten closer. He's pushing his bike to the edge and having crashes. And we're just sitting there saying, well, the problem with Bagnaia is he's not doing that. And it's hair splitting, that fine line of knowing the optimal result you can get and ensuring you get it when you're in a championship. That's what you have to do. And I think maybe that's been a key to Bagnaia's success in the past, is being able to easily accept where that limit is and setting it in a place where he's not losing point. I mean, you know, his battle of Martin was just unbelievable. And we saw both of them make mistakes like that because they were completely on it. But, you know, big picture, 10,000 feet. Yeah. But I'm conflicted, because if he really does throw it away, then we can tell Danny he was wrong. So I just, you know, I mean, there's that Danny being wrong versus, but who's going to step up and take second right now? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it might be somebody riding an Aprilia that we can do in our second point, because that's 2 podiums in a row now. That's Bezzecchi on the Aprilia, looking absolutely amazing. But on the previous point, I think what you were saying, Matt, we need to basically crossbreed Bagnaia and Alex Marquez to get the perfect MotoGP rider. Then if you breed the both of them, you end up with Marc Marquez. But no, Marc Marquez still has the crashies to him every now and then, but he does try hard. But somebody who doesn't, has not been crashing much. Bez on the Aprilia, been looking absolutely amazing. So unlucky in the sprint, getting stitched up at turn 1. But guys, this is like the second weekend now we've seen him, Matt, like getting away at the front and looking semi-likely he could actually win it.
Looking semi-likely he could actually win it at a track that they weren't completely there for. That's what I love. I mean, literally, they had to compromise their rear tire in the race in order to get the bike stable. But he gave a nice long interview, and he said what they've done is they had been working on, and we had this discussion, but they've been working on stability under traction. And they felt like they'd made a step with that. But their big breakthrough came with engine braking. They figured out the engine braking to keep the rear from locking under heavy braking. And then he went on to say, and this, you know, as someone new to the sport, this is an insight that I really appreciated. What that lets you do is close off people passing you on the inside and taking advantage of you in the initial braking phase, because you can brake later, you can brake harder, and suddenly they don't have that gap on you, that moment of overspeed where you've had to slow down to not lock the rear. They don't have that limitation. And we can see that even on his kind of slow end of race pace, it still took Acosta 5 laps to get by him on a much faster KTM. And that's entirely down to the improvement Aprilia's made in their braking. So yeah, chapeau Aprilia, a little bit more, and it's going to be juicy.
And I think it's a really easy bike to ride at this moment. They developed it really well during the season, but if you see how quickly and almost smoothly Jorge Martin has gelled into it, and I mean his Sunday was. It was really, really good to see, starting P16.
Race, isn't it, essentially?
Gobsmacking his Sunday was.
Yeah. And while he still is really trying to find his own new limits, and the bike must be so nice to ride if you're able to do this. So quickly after returning. I mean, they often say that the amount of time you're out due to injury, you need at least that amount of time to return to your former shape. But he's at this rate, like he said himself afterwards, it's a matter of races before I start battling for victory again. So that's it says something about that bike. But it's also massive kudos to Aprilia to develop this thing without their lead rider for so long. Because let's be honest, I mean, Bez, he's doing great, but when he signed for them last season, it was always the question, okay, but who's going to be the number one rider? And it turned out to be Jorge. But so I'm really curious for them next season when we enter the last season of these regulations and things have probably smoothed or evened out even more between the teams. I think it's just really impressive from both of them.
Well, what I love is the DNA of the bike, and this is according to Aprilia themselves, fast and flowing. And that is why I think, just on a sheer aesthetic level, you just love to watch them go around a track. Yeah, there's the power of the Desmo, and the KTM's on acceleration are mad. But there is an aesthetic to it. And I think that's why he's been able to come to terms with it. Although, I mean, to be very clear, when they started the season, it was trying repeatedly to kill him. So they have come a long way.
Yeah, they have. And you mentioned about the braking stability and getting the electronics and getting things. And I think that's the one thing that convinced him to stay. Because remember, it wasn't that long ago he was wanting to leave it. As you said, the bike was trying to kill him. And apparently when he got onto that private Mazzano test, he felt it almost immediately in the first braking zone that they'd made huge strides in that area. And that was the one thing I think that was scaring him.
Well, yeah, because, as Bezecchi said in his quote, that's where, and a lot of the current form of MotoGP, that's where a lot of the magic happens, when you're passing someone or when you're defending. And if you're on a bike where you're used to being able to brake like he was on the Ducati, and you do it and the bike chucks you high side into traffic and you get hit by somebody else, if they don't fix that, I don't blame you for not wanting to be on it, because there's no way that bike in that form is ever going to be able to be competitive. But they fixed it, or they fixed it enough, because, Pez was still running the soft tire to sort out some issues. But on the medium tire, 16th to 4th, seconds behind his teammate. And
Stunning.
Again, tell me how you can't pass this track, because he laughed. He's like, no, he's like, there's some great passing opportunities out there. There's this turn and that turn, and you just got to have
from the first laps as well, isn't he? You see him, he's brilliant. He's got great prowess in the pack, and that's what we've kind of missed. We've been missing seeing this fiery Jorge, and he's been coming up, and arguably his pace was quicker than Bez's. I thought on a track which may be easier to pass and maybe another 5 laps, he would have been on the podium. He's very, very close. And think of the time advantage that Bez had. I think he took like 3 or 4 seconds out of Bez's race time, like overall, comparatively, over the race. So amazing from Jorge Martin. And Aprilia have been allowed to do this because we have these concessions. And we love concessions. They're great. They're helping Aprilia and KTM come back into the fray. So they're allowed to do like a bit more testing, allowed to bring a few more little things and bits and bobs to the races that the all-conquering Ducatis are. And this is absolutely brilliant for the sport. Now, if you'd like to give us some concessions, if you'd like to give us a few bits and bobs, maybe some tidbits of information, or give us some feedback, or even maybe have a bit of a whinge and a complaint at us, well, you can do that by emailing us, missedapexmoto@gmail.com. That is missedapexmoto@gmail.com. But if you're watching this on YouTube, why not give it a like? Why not give it a share? And why not give it a subscribe? So you can catch us whenever we have a video out. We always have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We always have videos coming up. And in the off season, just before we're going live on air now, Matt and I are having a little bit of a discussion. We've got some very interesting, potentially tasty off-season content coming as well. So why don't you like the show, give us a follow, and give us a bit of feedback. We do try to reply to all of your emails. So we were just talking about concessions and how good they are. And another team that they have brought right back into the fray is KTM. Fantastic. Despite several crashes, Acosta was really quick and got his best result of the season, P2. And we like to see Acosta. Acosta's pretty fiery, and there's some rivalries here. He made the soft tyre work. He was one of the only ones who was looking really strong at the end of the race. And actually, I think Mark almost got a bit worried because when he got batted down, you could see before he wanted to get past Morbidelli that Acosta was coming. And I don't think needs to particularly get on. And I think he knew Acosta would have shoved it up the inside and made a move on him. But the one person who I think we were denied, and this is what I want to discuss and ask my panel here, Enea Bastianini. He's been vacant all year pretty much, and he's come back strong. He was super quick. He was up to second in the sprint before Quartararo torpedoed him. Then Bastianini then reckoned that the ride height device was broken on that crash, and he reckoned that was the cause of him skittling Johan Zarco out later at lap. But Jules, this essentially ended his weekend, and I think he's a bit of an innocent victim in this.
Yeah, it was really harsh, and it surprised me a lot that the stewards would come out in such a hard way, because
Yeah. So what did they give him in the end? They gave him a double, didn't they?
double long lap penalty, and I mean that throws you back so much, especially at this track. And why it surprised me also was last race. Everybody lauded the race directors for not intervening at some fierce battling. So why they came out with this harsh decision all of a sudden, I thought it was really weird, especially because if you look at the what Bastianini argued. That his bike was broken after being taken down by Fabio. Of course, we don't see the data. Those guys do, but even still, if his bike wasn't broken, why two? While you punish Fabio with only one long lap,
Yeah, so, the guy who caused everything only gets one.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous in my eyes, and just like you said, it excluded him from playing a role which he, I think we all believe, really would have played in the Sunday race.
Yeah, but Matt, I think the reason why I think it was justified giving him a double long lap penalty was that this was his second offence. So I think he got a long lap penalty for, I think, was it taking out Bagnaia in Le Mans? Remember, he caused that start pile up. But it's a bit odd. So your second offence and you get a double penalty going up. So they've got this rolling thing. So if he does it again, does he get 3 long lap penalties? I mean, it's a bit silly. And they reckon that the ride height device excuse didn't wash because they reckon it doesn't affect braking performance. I still think that's harsh. What do you say?
Well, I'm going to take a more nuanced view here. Does each one mean you get an extra long lap? No, probably not. But it's sort of the thing where if you are getting this penalty and then you're getting it again, well, then you're riding recklessly, according to the stewards, and you're potentially hurting someone, and they want to discourage that. They'd rather you err slightly on the side of caution, and the incident is flagrant enough in their view that you deserve a penalty. This is going to be their justification for why he got the double. Is that the first one? This wasn't like in the heat of the moment, you're pretty next to each other, and it's the kind of mistake that even the riders would be like, yeah, yeah, you took me out, but if I'd been in your place, I probably would have tried the same thing, and we probably would have had the same result. This was absolutely like Torpedo City as far as Zarco was concerned. And he was furious about it. He wasn't having a good weekend anyway. This didn't make it better. As far as the broken ride height device goes, I was surprised that they even bothered to mention the ride height device, because it was pretty clear that what he really also lost was probably a bucket full of aero that would have also greatly affected his braking performance. And I saw the stewards say 2 things about the ride height device. One, that technically they didn't quite get convincing enough data that it was like smashed, broken, in the bin. It might have been deployed or not deployed or stuck in one position, but not the same thing as broken, where it's just flopping about and you don't know what you're going to get when you stomp on the brakes. but also that he was aware that it was malfunctioning, and he
So
chose
he should have been cautious then.
So
shouldn't
he should have taken that into account going into that corner. And of all the things they said, I think probably that is, because when I saw it, I was like, oh, clearly he lost a lot of aero. He wasn't aware of it. And then when he hit the brakes, he just simply, the rear locked up. He did not get at all what he expected, but he had no way of knowing because he got hit from behind. But if you know about it, then
you should ride to it, shouldn't you? Really,
you should have it in the back of your mind. Yeah.
Okay, fair cop then. We're kind of saying that's probably maybe a bit of fair cop then for that. But he gets a double long lap, and then that means he's riding angry on lap 1 of the Grand Prix, and everyone's fears were that someone was going to crash over one of the chicanes, and it happened. He bins it, he slides across the track, and fair play to everyone who made adjustments, and nobody hit him, and it was terrifying. You see him sitting up and looking round like, oh my God, who's going to hit me? That was horrible to see, but thankfully, touch wood, he didn't hit anything. Nobody hit him, Jules. The worst fears happened, but luckily no consequence of it.
Yeah, well, and what I really found remarkable about that bit, he goes down, he obviously recognizes, okay, I was in front of the bunch, I'm sliding across the track here. Chances are pretty big that I'm going to be hit. So you see him looking, and despite having a helmet on, you imagine how big his eyes are at that moment. But the moment he's past the line of riders, immediately switches back to his racing mentality, looks where's my bike, and tries to resume, and that's I thought that was really cool to see how the it's not the devil and the angel on your shoulder, but some black or white switch in a rider's head that went from on and off and on again.
He can never stop the racer. He can never stop the racer. Well, we have a couple of races on the Hondas as well, because we're talking about concessions. Honda were also looking great. This is the best they've arguably looked in years, really, comparatively, as a sort of a breadth of results over the weekend. Marini has been a changed man since Suzuka, since those horrible injuries. He got his punctured lung, and he broke his hip as well. Like, it was a horrible set of injuries after his Suzuka testing crash for the 8-hour. Amazing. 4th in the sprint, 5th in the GP, looking genuinely strong. On a weekend where Zarco's been amazing, Zarco's been the man for Honda, and Marini has been nowhere really, Jules. And it's great to see, because we know how much of a good rider he is. He's a Grand Prix winner. Like, it's great to see him come back.
Definitely, and I think the track really suited the HRC bikes, because you don't need a lot of top speed, you don't need a lot of power for a longer time, and it seems to be a pretty sweet bike to ride around these curves and corners and turns and everything. So I'm really curious to see what they can do in Barcelona in 2 weeks, because as we know, it has one of the longest straights of the calendar. But overall, we've seen him climb up the pack in this season, which is good to see, and it seems also a bit more real or on merit as the how do you say,
the Le Mans win, wasn't it? There was a crazy fluke, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
They had, so,
yeah. Or Yamaha with Quartararo, showing up for a couple of poles. This seems more genuine, but it also seems to come at a cost. And that's, as you mentioned already, Johan Zarco, who actually was their bright bulb for a lot of this season. But Honda has decided, okay, we're going to develop the factory bikes, and the bike that Zarco is riding for LCR, they want to keep that the same, to have a baseline. And, if this
Makes
is
sense.
a bike where you can ride or get your results, you keep doing that. And our factory bikes, we're gonna tune them and develop them further. So, which in this outcome, as we saw this weekend, looks really harsh all of a sudden, because Zarco was nowhere. He wasn't even mentioned apart from the Bastianini
child. He's been doing really well.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's been left behind. He's being used as a control and the standard.
Yeah.
So I guess he has to take that as a compliment, I guess.
Yeah.
I still want to see him on that HRC bike though, because Johan Mir, we was just saying, he stayed on for a couple of races. He ends up bidding it again, and slides off it. Marini outperformed him this weekend, you have to say, but very positive signs for Honda. That's really good. So I reckon we should move on to our honourable mentions now. And Di Antonio, super unlucky, and I think Matt mentioned it earlier that we were robbed of him because he was super quick, P2 in the sprint, looked mega. He had a bizarre issue on the, not even on the warm-up lap, it was a sighting lap going to the grid. He had a lack of power. The team thought they'd fixed it, sent him back out on the warm-up lap, and he and still lack of power, so he had to make a pit lane start, but the wrong tyres, Matt.
His bike was absolutely not set up to run the race. His backup bike had the flip-flop tires on it, had the soft on the rear and the medium on the front, and it was a sort of a testament to how good he was riding this weekend that he still managed to make up that time, and he came in with the final point, I believe. Like, he just worked his way back into the points.
Yes, he did. He ended up getting 15th. Yes, he did. You are right. So amazing, really. That's what recovery from a pit lane start with the total wrong tire combination on it here.
Yeah,
Epic.
but it is you're just like, could we have not just seen? Right there. It would have been really fun with Bezecchi and him going at it.
Yeah, it's a shame we never got to saw it, but something we did get to see, and this is our end of our main topic, so I want to finish and I want to put a question to my panel. There has been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of trash talk, there's been a lot of negativity around it. Balaton Park. Jules, I'll go to you first. Do you think it's suitable for MotoGP, and would you like to see it as a permanent fixture on the calendar?
I wouldn't miss it if they would ditch it, but for all the negativity there was on beforehand already, and also during and after the weekend in various podcasts or media outings, I think it wasn't that bad. I think we saw quite a bit of overtaking, and I think it was a track that showed the daring overtakers came to the surface. You know, Jorge Martin making up 12 positions, Acosta. You know, these type of daring hit or miss attempts. I really liked like that, and I think we have a few tracks on the calendar which we think are pedigree or whatever, who don't serve great races either all the time. So wouldn't miss it, but wouldn't mind if it stayed on for another year.
That's a very well said. Matt, what's your thoughts on it?
So this is challenging because I don't have the same length of watching the sport. So I don't have the same appreciation for the tracks.
That's a new perspective then. From a new fan's perspective, how did that come across to you? Yeah.
From my perspective, partially I think it came off better than maybe it actually is in reality, because people talk so negatively about it from before we even got there. But I will say this, it's unique and its demands on the bike. There's not another track that I'm aware of that is like this. And if I have concerns about it, they would be mainly safety concerns. Like you mentioned, you know, the chicane sliding through the track, and we've seen in some of the runoff areas that maybe they need to be rethought in a way that contains the energy of crashed bikes in a safer fashion. Let's just put it that way. But certainly some riders seem to enjoy it very much. It operated nicely for the most part, and giving different we had 3 different manufacturers on the podium. I mean, what more do you want?
Amen.
It really compressed the field, gave different riders and different manufacturers a genuine chance to do good. And on a lot of tracks, you get exactly the opposite. Oh, that's a Ducati track. Oh, that's an Aprilia track. No, here, everybody was in the mix, and it didn't require rain or flag to flag or anything else for that to happen. Just genuinely, that was a byproduct of the track. And let's not forget, these heavy aero-dependent, super electronic device bikes are going away pretty soon. And then maybe we'll
That's a
really
great
like
point.
having a track like this around.
Absolutely, that is a great point. I agree with both of your points there. I personally quite enjoyed it. I think it was quite good. It's something different. Matt makes a fantastic point there. Yeah, we are hopefully moving into an era of more of traditional and proper bike racing. And I think it's a new challenge. It's nice to see riders wrestle 300 horsepower monsters around a tiny track. Now, to nick a quote from the brilliant Martin Brundle of the F1 commentary, we haven't had an F1 reference in yet, and we know we like to upset people with F1 references. He always says it's about Formula 1 cars around Monaco. MotoGP bikes around Balaton Park must be like flying a helicopter in your bedroom. It must be really tricky to try and harness that amount of power in such a small space. I think it provided a great challenge, and yeah, it's going to be, I think it's on the schedule for next year, and then I think they're going to reassess what happens to it. But I think that was about as big a success as it could have been, really. So, talking about successes, we'll finish our main topics there. Marc Marquez will go on to the standings, 175 points now ahead of his brother, a whopping 227 ahead of Bagnaia. Bezzecchi is in fourth and closing in on Bagnaia now. I think he's only like 31 points behind him now. Pedro Acosta jumps up to fifth, only 291 back. And there's a great battle, 291 points back from Marquez for Acosta, and then Morbidelli and De Gin Antonio in very close succession. So it's a raging battle for fifth there. But all the eyes in the championship is I think P2 is a great battle now for like essentially P2 in the championship. So that's looking really good. So as always, we like to finish with some awards. So Jules, who was your rider of the weekend?
Someone didn't think about it ahead of time.
I'm going Jorge Martin because he had a disappointing qualifying, given that he made Q2 directly in the previous Grand Prix. He had to start P16 for this one, and as well as in the sprint, which wasn't such an eventful race, but especially on Sunday, making up 12 positions to finish just outside the podium. I think that deserves a honorable mention.
Absolutely, it does. Matt, I know you'll have a penchant for stealing mine. I'll let you go next.
Yeah. Well, you've cleverly not written it in this time, and I actually looked. I was kind of on the fence about this, but I'm going to quietly go with Digintonia because of our setup Saturday speculation. Yes, he finished second in the sprint. He probably would have finished second in the race. Might have given Marquez a hard time, might have given Bezzecchi a little extra time in front. But that soft tire was never going to go. And we saw in the sprint that his bike was good, still several tenths off. But if his behind the scenes work is going to be the breakthrough that Bagnaia needed, then how could you not give him, rider of the weekend?
Yeah. Fair play. Well, you mentioned that the soft tyre didn't work. Well, somebody I think who did make the soft tyre work was Pedro Acosta, and he's going to get mine for going from a pretty nasty high side, a pretty wild crash, several crashes, being a bit of a loose cannon, to P2 in the Grand Prix on a soft tyre. Yeah, fair play, Pedro, and we want to see him in there a little bit more. So, moment of the weekend then. Matt, you can go now first, because Jules hasn't written anything down either, so I'm leaving him exposed as you invariably going to steal somebody's.
You say that, but my moment of the weekend is his rider of the weekend, which is Jorge Martin, adjusting his handlebars on the grid because he's still that far away from being fully comfortable with the bike. Like, he's on the grid and they're like, nah, it's up, down. No, get out of here. We're going to live with it now. We'll fix it later.
That's crazy. That's
just
like
nuts,
fundamental ergonomics, like on the grid of a. Yeah, that's nuts. Like, good spot. Absolutely nuts. Jules, what was your moment of the weekend?
In the aftermath of Pedro Acosta sending his bike up to
I cannot describe what Kyle just said with his mic off, but it wasn't safe for work. Let's just say that.
Okay, so Jorge Martin afterwards.
No, carry on. You can have it. No, you're having it. It's fine. It's all good.
I mean, he invited the cameraman that he almost killed with his flying bike over to the KTM box, and had a very candid conversation with him about if he was okay and well and all. And then after securing that he was fine, he said, do you want to see the box? and this cameraman, I mean, being at least twice his age, if not 3 times his age, was all of a sudden like a kid in a candy shop, and off they went. So I thought it was really cool, nice gesture as well.
Yeah, it was super cute. And after the race, when Acosta got second, he stopped at that corner, turned around and saluted him to the camera, and saluted him. He'd done that. So a friend for life, maybe. That was really cool. That was going to be my moment of the weekend. So my moment of the weekend, ad hoc off the top of my head, I've already mentioned it once, was Marc Marquez casually dunking a 37 on the last lap just to rub everyone's nose in it, which I thought was absolutely mental. So you'd be quite mental not to follow my panel, actually. So, Jules, where can people follow you?
You can find me on Blue Sky, and the handle is Jules on Racing.
Awesome. Where can people get you, Matt?
At MattPT55 on pretty much all of your socials.
Awesome. We'll be back again in 2 weeks to review the Catalan Grand Prix. As always, thanks for listening to Missed Apex MotoGP.